Good morning. Thank you for coming. The Micro Enterprise Symposium's first year. I'm glad to see you all here. I was actually on the committee that created it, so I'm very glad to see you here. We're going to be talking today about target markets. And one of the most common mistakes I hear from business owners, especially brand new business owners, is when you ask them who is in your target market, they say everybody. And we're enthusiastic as business owners. We want everybody to love what we have to offer, your product or service. The problem is when you're trying to reach everybody, you're not really reaching anybody. You have to be more specific than that. So if you've ever heard the expression, I miss you, but my aim is getting better, that's the reason for this seminar right here. We're talking about how to better reach our target markets. And we've got our 3 points here. Why not everyone can be your customer, how to identify your ideal client, and creative ways to reach your audience. If you don't know me, and several of you do, I'm glad to see some familiar faces. My name is Jennifer Goldman. I own a government and community relations firm called Resonance, which is based here in Fauquier County. You may also know me as the company that has a contract with the Fauquier County Department of Economic Development. I manage the 2 Fauquier Enterprise Centers for the county, which are in Vint Hill and Marshall. So if you have any questions as we go along, I know it's going to be a lot of information in a short amount of time, but please feel free. I will be answering questions as I go if you have them, but I will also be at the happiness bar at the end downstairs, so you can ask me questions there. All right. I'm bad with technology, so bear with me. The first time I did this was no longer English. But when you talk about your target market, like I said, a lot of people want to say everybody is their client. The problem, like I said, is you can't reach anyone really if you're not being more specific than that. And the scenario that I tell people is it's like having a crowd of people in front of you and taking a handful of darts and tossing them into the air. Now, we all know about science, gravity, they're all coming down. We know this. The problem is if you haven't taken aim at anybody, they might hit a few people, you might hit nothing. They may all just hit the ground. If you take that handful of darts, though, and you look around you and you say, you know what? You guys don't really look like you need what I'm offering. And you guys back there, you might need it, but you don't look like you're really going to hire me or pay for it. But if I take the 7 of you and I take my darts, each individually, I'm much more likely to hit these 7 people right here than if I threw them into the air and just got what I got. And that's the whole point of finding your target market. You need to figure out who they are, where they are, what they're doing, and how you can reach them, and hopefully do so in a creative way. So the next is talking about identifying them. Who's in your target market? And you really need to think about why you put together what you did. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why is it you're offering what you're offering? So if you ask yourself some questions, we're going to start with the first point, which was you try to reach everybody, you're probably going to reach more likely nobody. What's your why? Why did you start your business? Was it because there was something you needed that you couldn't find? So you decided to create it and offer it because there's probably others like you out there. Then that's part of your target market, people like you. What is it you needed? Why did you need that? And there are other whys, of course. Maybe you created it because you saw something that was missing in the marketplace that other people need. So think about that and ask yourself, why did you start this? What need were you filling and for whom? And then who benefits the most? Thank you, Nora. Who's going to benefit from what you have? Maybe you have a very specific purpose. Maybe you want to feed starving children or house the homeless. Those are the people who are going to benefit most. In some of those cases, though, you split your target market. There may be more than one because who's going to pay? If you're going to feed the starving and house the homeless, most likely you're not going to get them to pay you for that. Or at least I would hope you wouldn't ask them to. Might be a little unfair. And in that case, you wind up with, like I said, at least 2 target markets because you're going to need to market the people who are going to benefit so that they know you're out there and that you have what they need. And then you need to market to the people who are going to be paying. And a lot of these, hopefully, as you go, you're starting to narrow that list of possibilities of who's in your target market. To give you an example, before I started my company, I used to run a nonprofit organization, which was part of the Virginia Main Street program. The reason I started my business was because I wanted to have more control of my life. I wanted to have more time traveling, and I wanted to take advantage of all of my own benefits as a business person. I wanted to do more work with nonprofits and help organizations like what I ran. And I wanted to be able to help small business people. So I started my company, and I realized as I went along that probably the business owners, for-profit businesses, are not my biggest part of my target market. Most likely nonprofits and government organizations are. And so we drilled down a little bit more. And then when I marry that, my nonprofit experience with my business management degree, and realize that if I and now we can't speak, if we start to marry the two and do management consulting for nonprofit organizations, it takes me back to the Virginia Main Street program, where I have the most experience. So if I go to Main Street, there are actually 30 organizations in the state like the one that I ran. Then I've narrowed my choice down, and I say I have 30 organizations that I could logically market myself to who might reasonably hire me. However, they don't really have large budgets. So then if I cycle back to the government department, the Department of Housing and Community Development down in Richmond, they fund the Virginia Main Street program. So I went from anybody who owns a business, runs a nonprofit or government agency, to nonprofits, to Virginia Main Street organizations, to the Department of Housing and Community Development. I just narrowed it down to one. Literally, when I decided exactly what I wanted, at least for part of my business, I had one phone call to make. Not everybody can simplify it down to that degree, but that's where you want to go with this and taking the steps to narrow it down. The fewer people that you have to market to, the easier it is to reach them individually. Like I said with those darts, if I figure these 7 people, it's so much easier to go to them one-on-one or figure out what they have in common and where they are. You make your life a lot easier. So, next, reaching your target market. How are you going to reach these people? Sometimes it's hard to figure that out. Sometimes it's hard to really think about what all these people have in common, but they do. It might be a certain age range. It might be gender. It might be their specific profession. You need to think about the things that they have in common. Sorry, I'm going to cheat here. If I don't do this, I won't get the right slide at the right time. And what you want to do too is you want to stick out. You want to stand above the rest. You want to be different. If you can find a creative way to reach your target market, even better. Of course, the direct route is always better. Like I said, when I got down to that one person and it was a phone call, that's definitely the easiest thing. That's not really creative. But when you're marketing to larger numbers of people, getting creative and helping you stand out is how you want to go. So as I said, the next thing you're going to start to think about is, what do these people have in common? Is it age? Is it a geographic region? And as you start to think about that, then you start to also narrow down, okay, what other things do they have in common? So people of that certain range that are male or female that live in this geography, are they going to specific places? Are they all part of a particular social media that they tend to do? So you get into this little pie that I have made here. And these are just the simplified ways. Of course, there's a whole lot more that people could have in common of places that you can find them. But if you start with media, this is the traditional marketing and advertising right here. If you're looking at millennials, probably none of this. They're not watching television, they're streaming. They're not listening to the radio, they're streaming that too. I only know this because I have 2 of them, but too old to identify. Newspapers, even people my age aren't really reading the newspapers anymore. So if you're looking maybe at the baby boomers, maybe the newspapers, the magazines, definitely. People are still reading magazines, but again, probably not the millennials, probably, women, maybe some men, my age and older. We're still flipping through every page of the magazines. When you look at social media, that one's pretty segmented. You have to look at that. You have to study it a little bit and try to figure out the trends there, because I can tell you right now, my 2 millennials, they're not paying any attention to Facebook or LinkedIn. They're on Instagram, they're on Twitter. Some of them aren't doing any of it anymore, or they're using new apps that us old people don't know about yet. Places, where are they going? Are they hanging out at bars? Or are they going to grocery stores? One of the best examples that I've seen of somebody who knew their target market was a man I know who is a real estate broker out in Bristow. His name is Ashley Lay. And when I was living out in that place, at one point, we only had a Giant then. There was no Wegmans here. Oh my gosh, it was terrible. But as I went to Giant one day, every shopping cart in that place had his face on it, because he realized that his target market were women between the ages of 25 and 50, who, most of them had small children, and they were the ones who were making the decisions about buying homes. And he stuck his face on every shopping cart in there. That was a creative thing. I don't know that anybody had ever done it before. He might have just made it up. But if you can do things like that, you stand out. I'll always remember that. That had to be at least 15 years ago, and I'll still remember. Every time I see a shopping cart now, I'm looking to see whose face is on it. And then you have events. What kind of events are they doing? Are they, especially if they're part of your community. Community events are a great place if you're looking at people who are in a geographic region. And events like this. If business people, small business owners are part of your target market, being involved in events like this is a great way to reach people. You can sponsor events. You can speak at events. It's a great way to put yourself in front of people. And your marketing and reaching your target market doesn't have to cost money. Like I said, speaking, it didn't cost me anything to come here and speak today. I got to stand in front of a room full of people. So if you can find out where your target market is and you can get them all in one place, and you can speak to them directly, it's a great way. Well, now I'm going to ask for input. Does anybody have any creative ways that you can market and reach a large number of your target market without spending money? Commit a crime? Is your target market police officers and lawyers? Absolutely. When I was with a nonprofit organization, I mentioned I did community events a lot. First Fridays, things like that. I always needed volunteers, and that puts you right in the middle of the community. You come out and help. I'm sorry, Chamber of Commerce? Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, okay, so creating menus are a marketing piece that you hand out that has a return, something that you put out that has to come back to you. LinkedIn has a lot of great professional and group pages that you can join if they're in part of your profession, or maybe they're part of your target market. I ran a winery for a while, so even though my company is not, I'm not making wine, unfortunately. We talk about this, but it's okay. We can still buy it. We can buy it. But the wine, I'm not a wine person, but I can do business with wineries. I know how to help them with their marketing and their management. So I joined a lot of the wine groups and wine enthusiasts and wine manager pages on LinkedIn, and it gives you a great vehicle for communicating with those people. And it's really not, hey, I do this and you could pay me. It's just having conversation, which is a great way. And then people will, when you sound like you know what you're doing, people will start to ask you more questions and find out. All right, so good advice online, but carefully. It's as you would tell your children, right? And you had a comment.
Yeah, I was talking about, wanted to talk about how do you get your idea out. I'm here for my passion, but my day job, I sell hydraulic hoses, custom hydraulic hoses.
Okay.
So we focus on a lot of construction sites and farmers. So what I do is when I see a harvester out there, I'll stop by, shake hands, say hello. If you need anything, give me a call, I'll make hydraulic lines. Same thing with construction sites. So I kind of stop by and just introduce and talk on site with people that are could potentially utilize something that I have to offer.
And that's another great way. Yeah, one-on-one is always best. Direct. There are just so many ways that you can do it, directly or indirectly. But one-on-one is great. There's also groups. We've got where we are. We've got our livestock exchange. It's a great place where you meet a bunch of people who are out in the country with farms. That's another thing. Like I said, looking for those groups that have in common what you're looking for in your target market. Anytime you can get them gathered in one place and speak directly or market directly, it's so much easier that way. And it's word of mouth too. If you can also bring along some of your previous clients, word of mouth is still the best way that anybody really gets business. So if you bring along the people who have the right words, it helps. It's one thing if I say, you know what, I'm awesome, you should hire me. It's another thing if Susan says, you know what, Jen's worth $1 million, you should pay her. Because you're going to listen to her more. You know, well, and she's cuter. That's all right, you're buying the wine later. That is it for me. So thank you again for coming, and please, if you have questions now or later at the Happiness Bar, and I have one more comment.
There's one other way that I've heard that you can, it's not free though, you can do Google, they have words that you can pay for in the Google.
Absolutely.
My husband does it with what we do, and they'll type in what they're like a coffee house. And then
Right.
because you pay for certain words, your business will come up first, then they can just click it and go straight to your business.
Right, optimizing your web or search engine optimization. One that is free is listing your business on Google. You can get a Google My Business page. That way, at least you pop up. You may not be at the top, but you will at least pop up. And it's a great way. You can add photos of your business and things like that on there as well. And that doesn't cost anything. And I hope you use this opportunity today to network with more people, and maybe some of your target market is here. Introduce yourself to as many people as you can. You never know.
Thank you.
Thank you.